Can you hear me? Because I woke up having absolutely no voice, so it's a surprise. A very warm welcome to everyone. This second morning of this year's memoQ Fest, I'm really astonished by the number of participants turning up at this early hour. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here. And before we take the plunge into today's presentations, I'd like to make a couple of really short service announcements. First, I would like again to thank our sponsors, Edimart, Consortec, Elia, EasyLink, Globalies, Plunet and XTRF. Please make sure that you visit their booths and ask about them at the registration desk in case they have no booth here. There will also be a raffle conducted and offered by our sponsors mostly. The raffle will take place after the lunch break from 2:15 to 2:30 in the afternoon. And before that, please make sure you visit the sponsors' booths and leave your business card there so that you can participate. If you wish to win a voucher to Elia Networking Days Bucharest, you need to drop your card in the bowl at the registration desk. And one more thing, if you are traveling today or tomorrow and you have already checked into your flight and you need assistance checking into your flight or printing your boarding pass, you also need to visit the registration desk. So that's a good thing to remember. Thank you again for being here in such great numbers this morning. And I would like to introduce the first presentation and the first speakers, Insa Mingers and Angelika Zerfass, and they will be talking about data migration. They will be talking about for some organizations, a very ambitious goal of migrating to one core system to another, in our case from Star Transit to memoQ. So, and because I haven't been asked to say anything more, I'm handing over, and the floor is yours. Thank you for volunteering for this morning.
Thank you. I'll be doing some slides on other tools moving to memoQ, but the project we worked on together turned out to be a little bit more than what we expected. Yes. So that's why our presentation is named "The Devil is in the Details."
Thank you. Yeah, hi. I'm quite glad, you know, you're really a lot of guys, but the crowd is not as tall, as big as yesterday. Here you can see my team, the manual team of Steinberg. Steinberg is a software company offering solutions for media and music production. We are located in Hamburg, Germany. We are around 180 colleagues, and there are 7 in the technical documentation team, plus me. We have about 5 major products, each of them having a release per year, some minor updates also that sometimes require also technical documentation. Well, now imagine me. Working with Transit for several years and eager to improve the translation management at Steinberg. Last year in June, you see I'm still new, we decided, or we got in contact with memoQ, with Martin, and in July we had the first remote session, training session with Angelika Zerfass. We were quite reassured. memoQ would allow us to no longer have to work with packages, with local packages, but it could work on this almighty server. We do not have to write these long and annoying emails to get into communication with our translators, but we can communicate online in this cloud server. And last but not least, there is the import filter that allows us to configure it. In Transit, it was impossible to configure anything of this import filter, and we are working with Data XML, so there are a lot of customized aspects in our documentation. And yeah, there are 3 members of my team who do great work configuring the authoring environment, and they were so glad we would move to memoQ. In August, yeah, it's already summer, we finally convinced our management, yes, we go for the memoQ solution, we will buy it. For me, I thought, well, it's not that difficult, it can't be that difficult. I only have to take my translation memory out of Transit, that is exporting the TMX, multilingual TMX, import it into memoQ in this language pairs, and yeah, that's it, right? There can't be any further work. But actually, well, no, that was not the case. It was, I don't know, a bit later, September maybe, I wrote this helpless email to Agnes, still sorry for that. Why are there these mad pre-translation values? I had set up a project, 6 target languages, 370,000 words per language. That's not so big if you're working at LSP, but for me it was a huge project. And there were only 220,000 pre-translated, 90,000 words less than in Transit. I had no clue why, I didn't understand anything. I re-imported my TMX, I thought, what's going on, why doesn't it work? Okay, it was almost Christmas. My boss was already in holidays. I set up the statistics, but I wrote him a mail. I just asked, is it okay? And he said, no, we won't go for your solution. It's impossible. And so I spent my Christmas holidays with my TMX, had a look at it several times, and found out all the segment, the rows, including a XML element that has got a conref attribute, is not pre-translated properly. For those of you who do not work with XML files, a conref attribute is an attribute that allows to reuse the text in a certain XML element in another file. And yeah, there was a second devil, the spaces at the end of the rows. The QA check told me there are some segments with fewer or more spaces. Yeah, there was a problem. Fortunately, I have colleagues that are developers. I work in a software company. So I went to one of them and told him, can you just have a look at the TMX, please? Can you just help me? And he found out there are several patterns in which the conref attribute can appear. And these segments were to be replaced by modern memoQ tags. As he told me, the transit tags, they were old-fashioned and he wanted to go for replacing them. And me, simple search and replace work, I searched for the spaces at the end of the segments and replaced them. Actually, this was only 2 or 3 days of work, but to find it out, it was longer. Yeah, here you can see the examples of my XML with the conref attribute in it. This screenshot shows the TMX before we ran the script. Frank wrote. Greetings to Frank, by the way. And this is afterwards. So if you are a bit in coding and in XML files, maybe you can understand. Yes, so, is that the last? Oh no. My final values, my statistics I calculated were fine. I had 300,000 words pre-translated after these 2 changes in the TMX. Yeah. Actually, that was my first happy end with memoQ. And yeah, of course, there are still some devils we have to delete. Now we have to find out how to insert a language attribute in our translated XML files after the export. Maybe we need a script, maybe we should just start to use templates. And another problem is that In the figure element, there is a title element and an image element in the XML. And we do not want the image XML, the image element to be ported, but the figure, the title element, because we want to translate the text that is there inside. And another challenge we have to take is the index sort as element. In Japanese, you cannot sort the index easily. You have to add, I think it's katakana, into this element, and we have to import it. Yeah, import, I don't know, add it to the XML structure. Yeah. Again, a challenge. Yeah, that's my part. I think I would like to hand over to you.
Yeah, I think we'll take questions at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be moving on into other file formats or other tools. Mainly moving TMX files to memoQ, and I've seen quite a lot. TMX files that were not TMX files, but okay. Because when you talk about TMX, TMX is a standard, so to speak. Unfortunately, and you think, well, that means that I can exchange data between the tools. Unfortunately, when you try it out, you find out that the TMX files get heavily customized by the different tools vendors. And if you take a look at the specification of TMX, it only says it should allow you to move data without the loss of critical information. Now it's up to you to decide what is critical information. So it means the segments are transported, but all the stuff around it, maybe or maybe not. So let's take a look at that. So here is a TMX file from Déjà Vu, and I've imported that into memoQ to see where the different meta information comes up. So let's see. The system data usually travels well. So all the creation user data, the creation time, maybe change date, change user, that is something that usually travels quite well between the tools. Then there is metadata that accidentally has the same name as in memoQ. So it's named project, domain, client, which is quite common in translation tools. So we're lucky that that kind of information gets put into the exact same spot where it should be in memoQ. Everything else that memoQ doesn't know goes into the custom fields, with the exception of one, and I really don't know why. I'll have to check that again, because the file name doesn't come up anywhere. Not where memoQ would expect it to be, because it's not named document name, but file name. It's a different field, but it also doesn't come up in the customized field. So I'm a little bit surprised about that, but I'll have to check that. So if the fields have the same name, the metadata fields, as in memoQ, they would come up usually in that same spot. If they have other names, they very often come up as the customized fields. And you could go into the TMX files and do a search and replace. And for example, say, okay, instead of file name, it says document name, and then it should come up at the right place. Or instead of that long name, it needs to be the subject information. But for that, you need to take a closer look into the TMX file. Then we have our beloved context information, which is great. But unfortunately, every tool has a different way of saving context to the translation memory. So the big question usually is, well, I have these nice context matches, or 101% matches, however they're called, in my old tool. When I move to another tool, in this case memoQ, I don't get these context matches anymore. And here's the reason why. The context is saved in a very, very different way, and also defined in a very different way. What is the context? So Studio, for example, Trados Studio creates a hash code. Creates a hash code out of different kinds of information about the segment before the one that you're translating. The translation of the segment before the one you're saving right now. The information of the structural information, like was that a heading, was that a footnote, was that a simple paragraph. So all that information together creates the hash code. While memoQ explicitly saves the sentence before and after. So this is how it looks like. That's what's coming from Trados Studio, and that's how it looks like in memoQ. So you can see they're both using the property type X context, but memoQ has two of those, calling them pre and post, so sentence before and after. And how do you get from that hash code to some kind of information like what memoQ has? Because in the hash code, there is no information about the sentence after. They only use the sentence before, but also the translation before, and that's structural information. So there's almost no way to get information of that kind between the tools. So say goodbye to your context matches if you move between tools. What I found, what is a sort of a workaround, you could take the TMX file, put them into live docs, and from there move them into a translation memory, because that then creates, at least from the sequence of the sentences in the TMX file, the context that memoQ would create. It might not be the exact same context that came from the original documents, but usually the sequence inside of the translation memory is the sequence of the sentences, how they were translated in the document. So that is something that, in addition to moving the TMX to the translation memory, you could also use the TMX in the live docs, or through the live docs to the translation memory. Then, alignment information. That might also be something that's important, because you might want to have a penalty on something that comes from an alignment. Again, the tools treat that quite differently. All of them save the information to their TMX files, but not in a way that it's reusable for the other tool. So here we have, again, something coming from Trados Studio. It lists the source file of the alignment, the target file of the alignment, the quality, so was it a manual link between the segments or was it an automatic link? And as memoQ doesn't do it that way, all these fields come up as information in the customized fields. So it would need to look like that. So it would need to have the property type aligned, yes, and the document names as one, not as two up there. Yes, you can try to do search and replace and create that kind of structure, but something else that you could also do, as long as you have the customized fields, you can use those to put a penalty on them. If you know what the names of the fields are, what the content of the fields is, then you can use penalties and sort of fake the alignment penalty on that. Other import issues. I've had files that do not import at all. It's just like you try it and nothing happens. And that's very often because the structure of the TMX file has been so heavily customized that it's not the standard anymore. So the receiving tool will not expect the TMX file to look that way. So here's an example where we have inside of the segment tags, where the actual text of the segment should be, there is another tag, another property tag, an ID of some kind. This comes from across. Yeah, well, they have their own way of doing things. So, but here that's pretty easy, because you can just go in and, with regular expressions, delete. From segment property begin to property end, everything in between, just delete. And then it works, then it imports fine. It really was just this one point in the file that made memoQ think, okay, this is not a proper TMX file. So, yeah, find the offending part and delete it, search and replace, and then it should work. Other files sometimes don't import fully, they import partially, and that might be because at some point in the file there is something that is annoying to memoQ. very often the error message that you get will tell you, okay, at line so-and-so, column so-and-so, there is something that I don't like. Unfortunately, I've also seen files when, if you go to that point, there's nothing. There's a space, but there's not even a special space. It's just, I don't know why. So what I've tried, of course you can delete the segment, but you don't want to lose that information, right? So I've tried to move the segment, and that worked as well. So I just took the whole segment in the TMX file, moved it up one, and the file reported. I don't know why, but that's what you can try. Other issues in reuse, yeah, the tags, as we've heard, might not be the same in the tools. So they come up not as 100% matches, but as 99% matches because the tool thinks the tags are different. Or there might be something where somebody created a TMX file with their own ideas of not using the specification. So, for example, tags for tagging formatting, coming up with customized curly brackets or whatever. Actually, they've changed that now. So last year in September, they've changed it. That's for memsource. They changed that, and they're now using the regular TMX tags. So this should not happen. But I've seen it from other tools as well. So it can happen that a TMX file uses custom-built or codes for tags, and they just come up as text inside of memoQ or any other tool. So as then we're not using the standard at that time, yeah, you can do search and replace, and you can try to delete all that, but it's not a very clean way of dealing with the TMX. If you try to do search and replace, you need to be aware that it's not enough in memoQ or for memoQ to just use the TMX tags like begin paired tag and end paired tag. They have to be numbered. If you don't use the number, like the I equals 1 for the first tag in the segment and the I equals 2 for the second tag in the segment, it will not import any tags at all. It will just import pure text. Might be a little bit of work if you want to go that way. Yeah, so this was about translation memories, but we also have other resources that need to be moved to memoQ. There are possibilities for some, not for all. Of course, term bases can be moved if you have something in TBX format. It goes into QTerm or the memoQ term base. In the memoQ term base, you can import the source term and the target term, plus a definition if the field is called definition, and that's it. If you go to QTerm, you can build up the structure of QTerm so that it imports all the meta information in the term base that you're coming from. The same goes for multi-term XML files. And here again, memoQ internal term base will import the terms and the definition if it's called definition. QTerm will import everything. If you come from any kind of format like Excel, CSV, text files, preferably Unicode text files, that goes into the term base as well. Segmentation rules. If the other tool can export SRX, segmentation rules exchange format, that is something that memoQ can read. Otherwise, you will have to recreate the segmentation rules manually. Any kind of lists that you might have in the other tools, something that is similar to the non-translatables lists. That is very often something where you can just copy the list over. And other resources need to be recreated, like the file filters. I know that takes some time, taking a Trados tag editor INI file and recreating an SGML filter in memoQ. Anything that's special to the other tool, like fragment dictionaries, like in Studio they're called auto-suggest dictionaries, similar to the muses in memoQ, that is something that would need to be recreated from the translation memory, obviously. Settings of the QA checker is also something that you cannot move. And that's it. Any questions?
would XLIF not be a much better way of moving TMs?
Oh yes, of course. Oh, of course. And this is actually something that we talked about at one of the last Localization World Conferences. There was a meeting talking about, do we really need TMX and XLIF? Because they both do the same thing. They're both bilingual information on the segments that we have in translation. The consensus was that, well, TMX is multilingual, XLIF is only bilingual. That seems to be the only difference. So there is a discussion going on if XLIF might not be the better way to store translation-ready data as well. You're absolutely right. Yes?
Have you considered using, like, importing transit packages, PDF files?
Oh yes, importing transit packages and let memoQ create the translation memory out of that. That seems to be a better way than importing the TMX file, but it doesn't do anything about having extra spaces at the end of the sentences. So you would need to prepare the TMX files anyway, afterwards. Or go through the translation memory to search and replace of some kind. So yes, we've tried that, and I usually find that importing the packages is a cleaner and faster process. But if you have to change the segments afterwards, you might as well do that in the TMX.
If the TMX file at least imports in memoQ, so you can import it as a document, you know, as a translation document, did you consider doing some of these changes in the translation editor of memoQ itself? Because now we have regex, find, replace, even going into tags, so it might be an easier way to do than in the text editor.
Yeah, importing the TMX file as a translation document and doing all the search and replace there, yes, that's a definite option. And I think we also tried that. At least I did.
Not too.
Any more questions?
Can I just think, can people speak in the mic? Because no one can hear it that's listening.
Yeah, that's why I'm repeating the question.
That's what I
Sorry, I just wanted to say that sometimes when I have problems with TMXs, I just bring them into Oliphant, resave them, and it sometimes does the trick. It's magic sometimes.
Oliphant is a great tool, but sometimes with the more complex TMX files, it loses metadata because it recodes the property names, and sometimes we lose something. It depends on what you want to do. But Oliphant, I don't know if everybody knows Oliphant, a free translation memory editor. It still says it's in beta phase, but it has been so for, I think, 8 years now. But it's a good tool. It's really great to view a translation memory as a table. But you can also import it then to memoQ translation editor and have the same table view. All right, so we'll be around. Just come up to us, ask us questions as much as you like. Thank you very much.